Delegate Robinson has asked that we strike House Bill 1396.
Motion to strike 1396.
Second.
Moved and seconded to strike House Bill 1396. Please record the vote. Vote is 6-0. The bill is stricken. All right. Now we can. I think that's it, right? All right. Delegate Will. I'm gonna do it here. Come on over.
Is this good, Mr. Chairman?
Whatever's good for you is good for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, I think you have an amendment.
Clerk will just give you the amendments. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to report the amendment?
Please.
On line 16 of the introduced bill, after B period, strike and insert notwithstanding the provisions of 46.2-383, comma, and.
Someone move the amendment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Amendment before us. Delegate Will.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, before you, House Bill 1236 deals with an issue that's unfamiliar to us, some of us in Virginia, but it's very familiar with some other states in the Union and around the world. It has to do with lane filtering for motorcycles. And so what this bill does is simply allow the operator of a two-wheel motorcycle to pass another vehicle that is stopped for traveling at no less than 10 miles, no more than 10 miles per hour in the same lane, provided there are at least two lanes of travel in each direction. Such motorcycle does not exceed a speed of 20 miles per hour, and the operator executes such passing safely. And that's about it, Mr. Chairman. That's have a number of people to speak to it.
Questions from the committee? Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, why is this bill needed?
It's a safety measure, Mr. Chairman, and that's what's made it attractive around the world. I mean, there's insurance companies that support this. California Highway Patrol, actually, I think, if I'm speaking correctly, they've had it in California. There were some folks that were concerned, wanted to do away with it. The California Highway Patrol came and spoke in favor of it, and they've seen where they've actually cut down on accidents. There are statistics to show less motorcycle injury. They've compared accidents when lane filtering and accidents when riding all other times, and the lane filtering far lower than just normal motorcycle accidents.
Delegate Hurst.
Follow-up question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Well, you know, if we were to pass this, I just worry, and I'm looking at 46.2-838. It talks about passing at least 2 feet to the left of the overtaken vehicle. And if we have the kind of that 2 feet standard in there, motorcycle riders, you know, beginning to hear that this becomes law, I just remain a little unconvinced that it would actually work to make, you know, particularly I-81 safer. When there's a backup, we start to see this where motorcycles are wanting to go, you know, into traffic where that stopped vehicle traffic is, coming, you know, very close to where those stopped cars are. And I can't imagine, sometimes we have, you know, looky-loos who want to get out of their vehicle and see just how far the traffic is, and, you know, heaven forbid they open up their car door when a motorcycle is trying to go through this lane filtering. I see it from a congestion relief standpoint, but just don't understand again how this is meant to improve safety.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, those are very valid concerns, but actually practical experience shows that it isn't the problem that you may be concerned about, Delegate. I mean, I'm not arguing with you, because that is certainly another side of the issue, but the statistics show that it actually improves safety and it improves, you know, efficiencies and so forth. Gets the motorcycle on out of the way, if you will. It actually helps alleviate congestion.
Any other questions from the committee? Anybody in the audience here speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Matt Danielson with Virginia Coalition of Motorcyclists. There is a lot about this bill that would seem counterintuitive, but there's also a reason why this is a practice not only that has been adopted by California and Utah, the two states here, but also in much of the rest of the world, is because it does help reduce congestion. All vehicles actually benefit by it. I will tell you that in California, when there was a bill last year, there was someone that said, well, I don't like this practice and we shouldn't be doing it. The people that came out against it were California Highway Patrol, California Sheriff's Association, AAA of Southern California. They all came out in favor of this practice. They wanted to make sure that they keep it. I will tell you that a lot of times when we're looking at doing something new, a lot of people will come out and say, this is dangerous and here are the problems that we're going to see. We heard that when we went to right on red after stop. When we went to getting rid of the prohibition against two motorcycles riding abreast of each other. When we passed the law to allow motorcycles to treat red lights as stop signs when they're not. All of those people came forward and said, we're going to see all these additional accidents, and none of those things occurred. We've actually seen benefits in all of them, and we believe because of the empirical evidence that we have from other states, as well as other parts of the world, that we'll see the same benefit here. And I know there are other people that like to talk on this bill, so unless there are any questions, I'm going to sit down.
Anybody else in favor of this bill? Be brief.
Thank you. In this effort to be as brief as possible, I'm Michael Sayer. I'm from the American Motorcyclists Association. We've worked on lane splitting and lane filtering in many states. There's about a dozen bills in a dozen states, considering multiple bills over the last several years. We believe that this bill in here in Virginia is a good, safe way to introduce this practice to Virginia, being its restrictions and fairly conservative practices in this bill as compared to California, which is why Utah and the Utah Highway Patrol endorsed the bill there. This bill is very similar to that bill. And as far as some of the safety concerns that were brought up, because this bill restricts the speed of the motorcyclist to only 10 miles an hour faster than that of traffic, those speeds, again, speaking as a motorcyclist who has practiced this, those speeds really allow us to see and perceive these risks when they happen. Somebody opening a door, you're not naturally going that much faster than you. I would compare it to sitting in traffic in the city and having a bicyclist ride past you. It's about, that's a comparable situation, it's just a little bit louder. To that end, I would just repeat what Matt Danielson said about the agencies in California that support this, who have a ton of experience with road safety, between the insurance companies and the law enforcement community. And additionally, not only us as the largest motorcyclist organization in the world, the Motorcycle Industry Council, and CHP, California Highway Patrol, is one of the largest law enforcement agencies in the country, endorse this practice. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Thorpe. I'm a citizen up in North Virginia. I'm here today in favor of the filtering bill. Last year on April 22nd, while I was coming to a complete stop on 66 up in North Virginia, a car hit me from behind going roughly about 45 miles an hour, resulting in a shattered shoulder blade, collarbone, 9 broken ribs, collapsed right lung, 2 broken fingers, and some other internal bleeding issues. Had filtering been allowed, it would have let me get out of the way of that car and saved 2 weeks in the ICU, as along with all the physical and mental trauma to follow after that said accident. It absolutely is much, much safer for motorcyclists to be able to get out of the way safely of vehicles, especially with the amount of distracted driving that's happening these days. Just trying to get home safe every day we go on the bike. Thank you guys.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mark Flynn. I'm a motorcycle rider, 25,000 miles a year. I'm here in my individual capacity today, and I've done this in Europe, and it works very well. It makes things safer. In Virginia, 3 times in the last 20 years, when you're the last one in line on a motorcycle and there are people coming up, it happens to me on Chaco Valley Bridge. It's happened to me coming in from the west end on 64 when the sun's in people's faces coming to work. And the worst place to be is on the motorcycle in the back of that line, because the car coming behind you that still hasn't slowed down yet, can't see you. So 3 times I've had to actually go around, illegal or not. It was better than getting run over like this poor fellow. So appreciate your support. Thank you.
Anybody opposed to this bill? Captain.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Jackson, Captain, Virginia State Police. The department has concerns with this bill due to the fact that it is contrary to the state's work towards reducing fatalities and traffic crashes. As was mentioned earlier, that all vehicles will benefit from this. I also ride a motorcycle, so I can see for selfish purposes why I don't wanna wait in traffic, and why I would appreciate a bill that would allow me to cut in between travel lanes. The problems that come into play is not all vehicles will benefit from this. A typical travel lane, per VDOT standards is 20 feet, 10 feet per travel lane. That's gonna give you 20 feet. Commercial motor vehicles, as Delegate Hurst mentioned on 81, you're gonna have commercial motor vehicles that average 102 inches, not taking into account any mirrors or any other equipment that hangs off the side of that. That's not taken into the measurement. So two commercial motor vehicles side by side are taking up 17 feet of that 20 lane span, leaving 3 feet for this vehicle to pass between. The amended language I just heard about, I took and reviewed it, and according to a quick skim through, seems like it has to pass at least 2 feet from the side. That would be impossible just with two commercial vehicles, and I don't think that's unheard of to have two commercial vehicles. Additionally, when you have motorcycles splitting lanes like that, from a law enforcement standpoint, it does not benefit the motorist on the road and passenger vehicles. If a collision were to occur, if this vehicle were to side scrape your car, or the passenger car rightly within its right can travel anywhere within that 10-foot lane and move side to side. If they don't see this motorcyclist coming up to the side and they're staying within their lane, but they are moving slightly from one side to the other, if they collide, law enforcement will have no ability to take any enforcement action during any of these crashes. Therefore, the cyclist and the motorist would be liable through their insurance companies from our intent because of the fact that we would not be able to place a charge based on that. And I'll answer any other questions or come back up as needed, sir.
Thank you, Captain. Anybody else? I'll just say for the moment, I've never figured Delegate Wilt would cite California and Europe as reasons to do something, but I appreciate your gumption.
Mr. Chairman, that once in a while they get it right.
Put that on a mailer one day. That being said, the committee operates by motion.
Mr. Chairman, move to lay on the table.
Motion to lay on the table.
Second.
And moved and seconded to lay the bill on the table. That is not debatable. It's a recorded vote. Please cast your vote on the table. 3-3. Motion fails.
Due to lack of motion.
Due to the lack of motion, bill is still before the committee.
Move to report.
Second. We'll get there quicker.
Move to report is properly seconded. Those in favor of that shall cast your vote on the board. As amended, before it's amended. 3-3, fails to report. Thank you, Delegate White.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for your time.
Delegate Plum, come on up.
Thanks, sir. Let me make the first one easy for you. House Bill 616.
Yeah, sure.
I would respectfully request that you lay that on the table.
Second. All right, Delegate Plum requests the House Bill 616 on the table. It's been moved and properly seconded. Please cast your vote on the bill. All right, Delegate Plum, bill number 2.
House Bill 1644, Mr. Chairman.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, House Bill 1644 prohibits the driver of a vehicle from overtaking a passing vehicle stopped at a marked crosswalk and the pedestrians across the highway. Members, some say that this is really a clarification of what the existing law is. Since it's unclear if that's what the existing law is, let's make it perfectly clear. This comes about because of the increased number of crosswalks we have in Northern Virginia and the situation where you'll have someone who will stop as they're supposed to do under a pedestrian in a crosswalk, but someone would then swerve around them and create a unsafe situation. If I could, for the committee, my good friend and neighbor from back home, who is an expert on bicycling and promoted bicycling in our community, is here. If we could spend a moment or two to hear from him.
If you think that'll add some more context as opposed to getting questions first, then just.
Well, and I'll do questions first, however you choose to do it.
Let's, send on the committee any questions, Delegate Plum. Certainly have someone who's speaking.
Let me say very quickly before Bruce says something. Bruce and I live close together. He and I station when it first opened. I drove a Prius, he rode a bike, and a neighbor rode a bus. He won. Bruce?
Thank you, Delegate Plum. Chairman, my name is Bruce Wright, and we do have a major paved trail that goes through our area in Northern Virginia, and it passes many multi-lane roads. And I've seen the consequences of at least 2 crashes in which a person is crossing the road. That first vehicle stops, the second vehicle passes through and hits the person crossing, and it's been a major crash. And I think this bill will clarify the language. And as far as I know, it's difficult to research it, but I think 46 other states have included this, and it's part of the Uniform Vehicle Code. And I can give you that code if you'd like.
Thank you. Anybody else speak in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Noel Dominguez on behalf of Fairfax County. With the opening of the Silver Line as well as more concentrated growth in areas, we do have a lot more pedestrians using our roadways, and we do feel this bill would help make life safer for the pedestrians. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Champ Early, President of the Virginia Bicycle Federation, we support the bill.
Thank you. Anybody else in favor of the bill?
Brantley Tyndall with Sports Backers, we also support the bill. Thank you.
Mike Doyle for Alexandria and Fairfax Families for Safe Streets, we support the bill.
Thank you. Anybody opposed to the bill? Captain Maxey, you don't have anything on this, do you?
No, sir,
I'm just
from an
checking.
enforcement standpoint, I believe the code doesn't require anything more from us.
Anything from the committee? Anything further?
Move report.
Second.
I do have a question.
Doug, or
So, it's not, this doesn't identify when a person is in the crosswalk. So, I cross a bike trail routinely. Sometimes the bikes are stopped to the side. So would this apply when a person is, or a bicycle or whatever, is in the crosswalk or approaching a crosswalk? It just seems a little bit perhaps unclear on that.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Rock, it says in the crosswalk. And there are instances of where people stop and wait. But let me just say to you that the value of this bill be more in the education than it will be in terms of charging. And the education comes from having people become aware of the fact that before we're in a car, they stop, and maybe somebody else will help.
Doug Hurst.
Mr. Chairman, to answer the question, I think more completely, when a vehicle is stopped to permit a pedestrian to cross. So I think the operative thing to look at is the subject of the sentence, the vehicle being stopped, that you cannot overtake that vehicle wherever the pedestrian is. If the intention of the vehicle is to stop to permit the pedestrian to cross the highway. So it doesn't say anything about the pedestrian being in the highway. It doesn't say anything about the pedestrian being on the side of the highway. If a vehicle is stopped to permit a pedestrian to cross the highway, the driver of the other vehicle approaching shall not overtake. I think it's pretty plain language from reading the bill.
Doug Adams.
Just a question for the patron, and I appreciate your remark with respect to, it's probably more just to prevent than to enforce, but if an officer were to try to enforce this, is there a concern about that point that was just raised? You're really saying you're getting into the intent of the person who stopped in front of you if your vehicle is over to cross, because it's not something objective about whether someone's actually crossing. Would it be better language to say when someone is crossing the highway, as opposed to the fact that a person is parked to permit someone? Because it doesn't describe what the person is doing at all, who's actually walking, the pedestrian. It just describes the vehicle, why the person, why the vehicle may be stopped.
Mr. Chairman, again, the point of the bill is for educational purposes for people who are stopping, for people who are crossing the crosswalk. Know that you can't swerve around that stopped car because you're not going to be able to see who's in the crosswalk. So I'm with hesitancy say that a good lawyer probably could figure out whatever ways to say that, but that's the intent of the bill, and I think it communicates that purpose.
We'll go to Delegate Carter and then Delegate Rock. We'll close this out.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To perhaps more thoroughly answer the question, I believe that the phrase there, stop to permit a pedestrian to cross the highway, to permit a pedestrian to cross is referencing all the other circumstances that are already laid out in this section, for which, a vehicle would have to stop. So, at any clearly marked crosswalk, whether at mid-block or at the end of any block, at any regular pedestrian crossing, including in the prolongation of the lateral boundary lines, et cetera. So there's already a list of criteria there for when a vehicle would have to stop to permit a pedestrian to cross. And I believe that this additional language would tack onto that and say that when one vehicle has stopped under any of those conditions, then other vehicles shall not overtake.
Alright.
I believe, Mr. Chairman, we still have a pending motion.
There's a motion to move and properly second to report. Please cast your vote on the pad. Clerk closes roll. Bill passes 7-0.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Chairman,
everyone.
Member Committee.
Delegate Simon.
Thank you, Delegate Jones, Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
House Bill 160.
Sure, this is a pretty straightforward bill. As I think pretty much everybody here probably recalls, 2 years ago, I introduced a bill to create a special interest license plate with bearing the legend "Stop Gun Violence." On the floor, Delegate Ferris insisted on an amendment that would make it a revenue sharing bill and take some of the revenue off to create a special fund in DBDHS to address issues of mental health. I argued at the time that gun violence and mental health are two separate issues, and it's not fair to stigmatize people suffering from mental illness as being the source of all gun violence. Objected to the enactment clause at the time. Didn't have the votes at that time to do anything about it, so the woman who gathered the signatures said she'd rather do that than not have a bill. But I told her if I could get back in 2 years and we had the majority, I'd move to remove the enactment clause, and that's what this bill does.
Mr. Chair, does this require any discussion?
I don't believe it
Order
requires
report.
discussion.
Second.
I think everybody knows this bill.
Properly moved and seconded for House Bill 160. Having explained the bill thoroughly, and everyone at this table has knowledge of it, cast your ballot. But
Well, I'm gonna have to cast my vote no, only because I wasn't able to ask any questions to clarify my understanding of it.
all right, bill reports 4-3. Thanks, Delegate Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Guzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you House Bill 578 that is not new to some of the members. It's actually a returning bill that was also died 49 votes a year ago. So what this bill does is it increases the age of minors when they are inside a vehicle and an adult is smoking in the presence of a minor, from 8 to 18 years of age. Kids are getting secondhand smoke from a young age, and we believe that age is too young for kids to be breathing large quantities of smoke as they do in a car. The moving vehicle is the perfect place to create concentrations of tobacco and smoke. Secondhand smoke is the highest reason why people end up smoking. And the reality is that it causes asthma in children. The lungs for children are not fully developed when they are young, and it varies depending on many circumstances. So there are many states that have already moved through this, Oregon, Puerto Rico, Arkansas, Utah, Maine, California. And this is just a bill that it's about protecting children, Mr. Chairman. And I hope, I have some statistics from the Virginia Department of Health study, where it says that 150,000 youth who are alive today will die prematurely from smoking. 7,300 youth become new daily smokers each year, and 9.7 million packs of cigarettes are bought or smoked by kids. 13% middle schoolers, 35.5% for high school students. So I hope it is your will to pass this.
Questions from the committee? Delegate Adams.
Rosemont, are you concerned that this would be used by law enforcement as a reason to stop more vehicles that they would not otherwise stop?
I would say to Delegate Adams that this bill, my concern is about saving children's lives more than any other concern.
Delegate Hurst.
Mr. Chairman, to further answer that question, if you look at the bill itself, if you look at subsection C in 462810.1, you see that no citation for a violation of this section shall be issued unless they have caused a stop for another, so it's not a primary offense.
Any other questions from the committee? Anybody here speak in favor of the bill?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Lauren Schmidt on behalf of the Virginia chapter of American Academy of Pediatrics, and we do support this bill. Delegate Guzman spoke to all the statistics, but secondhand smoke is 27 times more concentrated in a vehicle than in a house. So we do support this. Thank you.
Anybody else in favor? Anybody opposed? Any further questions from the committee? Any for explanation? Moved and seconded to report the bill. Please cast your vote. All right, clerk will close the roll. 6 to 1, the bill reports to full. Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Delegate Ora.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. House Bill 193. And Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I hope this is just clarifying an existing law. This is relative to farm use tags. I've had some circumstances in my jurisdiction where farmers on their way home, driving their farm use vehicle, have been stopped by local law enforcement and questioned as to that being a valid use or not. If you go back in the history of this, Farm Bureau would tell you they would consider that being incident to the farm operation, i.e. if the service truck that you're driving at this farm and your house is between that and the next farm and you're going home, take a service truck home so you go from there to work in the morning, as it were. It's very straightforward, tried to make sure it was very narrow, just cover those circumstances.
Any questions from the committee? Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Orrick, are you aware, because in my jurisdiction, I am getting a lot of pressure from localities about proliferation of these tags that aren't actually for specific farm use, but because of a lack of manpower for enforcement and the fact that seeing a farm use tag on the roadway in a rural area doesn't necessarily engender concern. That what we are doing here, even though we're trying to clarify language of what is already, existingly done, that it might continue to embolden those to take advantage of the farm use tag system that we currently have.
Mr. Chairman, I respond, that's clearly not the intent. In my area, Spotsylvania County, we've got a bunch of farm use tags where folks are staying at the overnight hotel, obviously the construction workers or something of that nature. But conversely, we've also got where it seems some pretty active enforcement by local law enforcement. When they stop these vehicles, they're questioning the farmers, where's your farm, where are you going to, those kind of things, totally legitimate. But these are legitimate users of the farm use tags who are then being questioned, but you're really not supposed to be taking this home. And this is just to clarify that yes, if it is a legitimate farm use, it doesn't change whether it's legitimate or not. It doesn't extend it to anything beyond the current legitimate user of that.
Any other questions from the committee? Anybody here speaking in favor of the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Andrew Smith, Virginia Farm Bureau Federation, and we do support the bill and appreciate the delegate for carrying it to what we view also to clarify. Well, if you look at lines 22 and 23 of the bill, you can see that the farmer can go from one part of their property to another, and we've always interpreted that as being part also going to their home. An example similar to what the delegate gave is when I would be harvesting my grain, at the end of the day, I've got enough time to load the truck one more time. When I get to the market, I drive my truck home to be able to go to the market first thing in the morning. To address, Mr. Chairman, the delegate's question, we had this conversation prior to session. Our members are very concerned about those that aren't qualified to use it, trying to use it for whatever reason. We're trying to get at those abusers too. We put on educational seminars to bring people in, but also I've committed to Delegate Orrick as well as some others that have expressed some concerns. But we're going to try to study on how we can work to put more requirements on our own people that will make it harder for somebody to abuse it in the future. But we hope you will act favorably on the bill today.
Anybody else in support of this bill? Anybody opposed? Captain Maxey,
advocacy on, we agree, with Delegate from Hurst's point, there's a lot of abuse within this. However, this does add clarification to a purpose that they are using, so there be some legitimate.
Thank you. Doug Adar, last word.
Okay, pass it out.
Green
Move to
Operator
report.
motion. Move to report.
Second.
Second.
Supported by the farmer from Fairfax, is it?
Please cast your vote on that.
I have farms.
Urban Farm.
Two more than I have.
Clerk, close roll. Bill passes 7-0.
Thank you,
Doug.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee.
Doug Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the subcommittee. HB 247 was brought to me by Alexandria Families for Safe Streets. We live in Alexandria in a wonderful community where a lot of people walk and a lot of people drive, and it is important that they respect each other. Unfortunately, we've had some incidents in Alexandria where we've had a number of people killed and seriously injured by drivers. People walking right there in the crosswalk, doing everything right, and unfortunately were very severely injured. Under the current code, even if you commit serious bodily injury, including things like disfigurement, lifetime needs of operation, and so forth, it's a misdemeanor. It's not even a misdemeanor. It's a traffic infraction punishable by a fine of no more than $350. Folks in the community, and some of them are here that want to talk, testify, felt that if you cause death or serious bodily injury to a pedestrian who is lawfully present, so we're not talking about kids running out in the street, we're talking about someone walking within the crosswalk, someone walking with the cross light, and you're so negligent that you cause them serious bodily injury, that there needed to be a higher penalty. In this case, it would be a Class 2 misdemeanor.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions from the committee? Doug, there are.
Permission to ask patient a question?
Doug, there are.
So definitely know what you're trying to do. I guess my question is, we already have under 46.2-852 reckless driving general. This is a Class 1 misdemeanor, so it's even, I mean, that's punishable for 12 months in jail. And it says irrespective of the maximum speeds permitted by law, any person who drives a vehicle on any highway recklessly or at its speed or any manner so as to endanger the life, limb, or property of any person should be guilty of reckless driving, which is, so I guess my question is, why do you feel like we need this when we already have kind of a general catch-all reckless driving already in the books?
It's a fair question. I would say it's another tool in the Commonwealth Attorney's toolbox, and the Commonwealth Attorney of Alexandria, Brian Porter, does support this. I think it's very easy to say that someone caused death or serious bodily injury. You can do that, but maybe you would argue that any serious bodily injury is reckless. But I think if you listen to some of the folks I brought here, they will tell you there have been cases where people have been seriously injured and that prosecution was not brought. So maybe they can explain why that happened in their cases.
Anybody from the public wants to speak in favor of the bill?
Yes, my name is Mike Doyle. I'm with Alexandria Families for Safe Streets as well as Fairfax Families for Safe Streets. We are a pedestrian-focused safety group, pedestrian safety on the roads. Myself, I've been crashed into. I was in the crosswalk. A car turned left into me. He was not deemed reckless because the police could not, the standard to answer a question of recklessness is a very high bar. And most of the people that have been crashed into in our organization, we have about 15 people that have either lost family members, killed because of cars crashing into them, in crosswalks in the right of way, or people seriously injured, like myself. I've been 3 years in neurological rehab. Not only does it affect me, it affects the family. My wife and other people are seriously affected by this. But what's happening is that the drivers are going away with a $50 to $250 fine when they are killing people, because police could not be able to, and the Commonwealth Attorney could not get enough evidence to determine the high bar of recklessness. So this is at least some type of deterrence that hopefully will translate to people to slow down and look where they're going. seriously injured and killed. So I respectfully ask you to consider and support this bill.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Champ, Northern Virginia Bicycle Federation, we support the bill.
Thank you. Anybody else in favor of the bill?
Hi, I'm Brantley Tyndall again with Sportsbackers and also Richmond Families for Safe Streets, another organization of people who've been killed or injured in serious crashes. Want to talk about some of the numbers about why this is so important. In the past 10 years in the U.S., pedestrian fatalities have gone up 53%. In Virginia, it's 63%, and in the Richmond region, where we're focused, it's gone up 250% from 8 to 28 people in 10 years. And there are a lot of factors about why that is, but a big part of it is that behind the wheel, there's sometimes a lack of respect for people walking, and this might relate to another bill we'll talk about later, but a lot of crosswalks are not marked. They're unmarked crosswalks, and so how you manage to respect someone in the street when you come on them and there's not paint on the sidewalk might change your behavior. So this is about changing behavior and saving people's lives. So thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Sarah Taylor with the City of Alexandria. The city supports the bill. As Delegate B noted, our Commonwealth Attorney supports the bill, and he wanted me to communicate that despite the common misperception, it is extremely difficult to get a reckless driving conviction when a driver's simple violation of a traffic statute or ordinance results in death or great bodily injury. He said driving itself has to be reckless, which connotes gross and wanton misconduct, and a traffic violation normally does not satisfy this higher standard, and the fact that a violation results in injury does not necessarily prove recklessness. So, hope you'll support the bill.
Thank you. All right, anyone opposed to this bill? Thank you all for the questions and the testimony. Any operating comment?
Just to conclude, I think that someone looking at their cell phone, for example, and hitting and seriously injuring someone would probably not be reckless driving, gross and wanton, but definitely is negligent, and definitely maybe a bill like this would encourage people to be more careful.
Thank you. Any operating comment?
Report.
Report. Being no second on the motion. Correct. Thank you, Delegate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Delegate Corey, you can. Sorry. Okay. You got it. You good? Delegate Corey.
Yes.
So you're good.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. House Bill 1705.
Seems like this is the crosswalk. Feels like that to you too.
I wish it wasn't.
Well, here comes another one. So, 1705 came to me by a constituent who was injured as he walked across a well-marked crosswalk of a 4-lane road. And what happened was one car stopped on the outside and the car on the inside. No, one car stopped and then the one behind him came around and hit the pedestrian. And the gentleman who was hit was extremely upset that he found out that it was not technically illegal and it was very difficult to take anything to court. Now, this is a long time ago. I put this bill in 5 years ago. Anyway, so this bill attempts to make it clear that by stopping and remaining stopped until such pedestrian has passed the lane in which the vehicle is stopped, that is the problem. That's the crux of the problem, and that's what you get a penalty.
Questions from the committee? Anybody here speak in favor of the bill?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ken Champer, Virginia Bicycling Federation. We're seeing as was alluded to earlier, a really terrible trend with the number of pedestrians and bicyclists that are being either injured or killed. In 2015, in the state of Virginia alone, there were about 80 pedestrians that were killed. Last year, that was 126. That's almost a 60% increase. And we know people are texting and they're doing everything except paying attention to what they're doing. And a matter of fact, as we mentioned a couple of years ago, the former speaker, Delegate Cox, was up at the crosswalk up on Broad Street across from City Hall in the crosswalk and was run over up there. I mean, it can happen to any of us. And this just makes it really clear, if you're a pedestrian in a crosswalk, people need to stop and not try to get around you or pass around or scoot around. It makes it very simple, very black and white. and we think it makes our streets a whole lot safer. And we think this will help bring those numbers down from an all-time high last year. So we would ask you to support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Noel Dominguez with Fairfax County, and our Board of Supervisors also does support this bill for the reasons I already mentioned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bruce Wright from Reston, and I support the bill, and I think it's a compliment to Delegate Plum's bill. It makes it clear that you've got to stop at a crosswalk, and it kind of clarifies what you mean.
Thank you. Anybody opposed to the bill? Delegate Corey, final word.
Just to say thank you for hearing it, and it does complement Delegate Plum's bill, and I know you know the numbers. It's really shocking how many more pedestrians and bicyclists are. So I ask you to pass the bill, please.
Committee operates by motion. Report.
Second.
Move to report and properly seconded. Please cast your vote.
I carried a version of this 2 years ago.
My
Clerk
first
shall
one
close the roll. Bill
This was the first
passes
bill.
6-0. Thank you, Delegate Corey.
Thank you.
Delegate Wyatt.
First bill that I ever presented. And about 10 minutes after they killed it, I went across the street to 7-Eleven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I have House Bill 1557, which allows the Department of Criminal Justice Services to now review our tow truck driver license and permit someone that has been convicted of a crime more than 15 years. So it kind of, it puts it back into criminal justice services so they can, it's in the bill that actually says the department may deny, so they have the right to grant a tow license on convictions that are more than 15 years. And the genesis of this bill was and I'm graciously, I appreciate Delegate Bagby, co-patron this bill. This comes from a resident in Duquesne County who actually drives for a company in Charles City County, where he was convicted of a burglary back in 1983. So more than 35 years, 37 years later, he works at a mechanic shop in Charles City County, but he still can't drive a tow truck. So he's matured now, he's in his 50s, and the owner actually approached me when I first got elected to see if I would carry this bill, and from hearing discussion from a few others, that this has been talked about in years past here. So the Department of Criminal Justice Services can still deny registration for any person who's been convicted more than 15 years of violent crimes. It also, the bill does not change any existing pertaining to sexual offenders. They'll still be restricted not to be able to drive a tow truck. I hope it's the will of this committee to record and pass this on.
Questions from the committee? Anybody in the public in favor of this measure? Anybody opposed to this measure? Move to report. Move to report and properly seconded to report. Delegate Adams.
A question for council, I think, if that's allowed. When was the last time this section was changed?
Mr. Chairman, this bill was, or this code section was last amended in 2017. And at that time, the bill allowed for the issuance of temporary registration and driver's authorization documentation by DCJS for tow truck drivers.
So,
Delegate Adams.
follow up. So the difference with this proposal is to, that it would no longer be a temporary license, it would be a permanent registration?
Mr. Chairman, the bill in 2017 does not relate to the subject matter of this bill.
Okay. Maybe I didn't understand what you said, that it allows for,
provisions related to, who's eligible for a license found in subsection C of the bill from 2017 that I'm reviewing now, amended subsection B. To discuss temporary registrations in a different situation. We're talking about in this bill who would be eligible due to their criminal history for a registration as a tow truck driver.
And I will add, and I asked this question in our agency meeting, because I've come into situations in my legal practice in which I represent folks who are looking for licenses through DCJS and they're statutory. Sometimes DCJS has the discretion to grant a license, however, there is a statutory bar that says if this person has a felony, they can't do it. I think, and I'm not sure, and we sort of debated on this as to whether that comes in conflict here, because I think there's a code section that says if you got a felony, you can't get any licenses under this list. I'm not sure if this is on this list, but understand where the picture's coming from. I think we've all got people in our lives who are trying to sort of get back on their feet or get back into the game. So, Delegate Adams, if you have concerns, maybe we can work this out between now and full, or I certainly understand.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm not quite sure I'm getting it here in terms of how the code section works.
Yeah,
I don't think I probably haven't looked at it since 2017. But I just remember at the time, I think I supported that effort. I was just trying to get my head around how this is different.
Counsel.
Delegate Adams, I believe you might be recalling that last year we had a bill that was very similar to this bill, and that may be what you're recalling. We had that bill in subcommittee that did something, it would have done something very similar to Delegate Wyatt's bill of making this bill discretionary. It was reported out of House Transportation and ran into issues in House courts. So that may be what you're recalling with the prior legislation.
Any further questions from the committee? Do you have a motion to report? We have properly seconded. Any further? We will cast our votes on that. Alright, clerk shall close the roll. House Bill 1577 reports 5-1. I appreciate Delegate LaRocque's vote to keep it on the regular calendar for further discussion. I probably was going to do the same thing, but thank you, Delegate. Delegate Krizak, close us out.
It's been a hectic day going up and down from here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This HB 1427 authorizes a private vendor that operates a video monitoring system for school vision for the purpose of recording those illegally passing stop school buses to impose and collect an administrative fee to recover the cost of collecting the civil penalty. So what the problem is, it's a civil penalty. There's really, it's not, there's no points, there's no criminal liability, and it's kind of an honor system to pay it. You don't have a lot of, you have about 50% of the folks who are paying. And by doing this, this $100 is kind of language similar to the hot length provision already in Virginia Code. And what this allows you to do is have this extra fine, and it's cleverly done where if you get the letter that says if you pay this $100 within 30 days, you only need to pay 25, and so that plus the 250 that you owe, and then that way people are more likely they've done this in other jurisdictions, more likely to pay. The money, remember, the more that people pay, the more that goes to the school division, and it's the contract with the vendor and the school division to come up with that. Usually it's a 50-50 split. So that's what this is trying to do. It's trying to, I think there's now about 12 school divisions in Virginia that have these cameras, and we all seen it. People are driving past school buses all the time, and the cameras are a real deterrent, and getting a fine is a deterrent as well. And getting another fine for not paying the first fine, maybe that'll help. It should help, and they found that it usually gets up to about 60 to 75% compliance.
Thank you,
Delegate Friesen.
Do you believe there's an amendment?
I'm sorry, yes, there is.
Alright, so we'll get the amendment distributed.
Thank you.
That's Mr. Chairman, that's what I was describing with the, that if you pay it within 30 days.
Move the amendment?
Alright, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright, amendment before us. Any questions from the committee? Anyone in the audience wish to speak in favor of this measure? Unless Delegate, Delegate, you have a question?
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Laura Bateman, and I'm representing the City of Richmond and the City of Richmond Public Schools, and we're very supportive of the bill. And think it very much aligns with the city's Vision Zero and safety program, so we are fully supportive.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Chris Kerr. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Bus Patrol America, and we support the bill.
Thank you. Anybody opposed to this bill?
Me.
Delegate Bagby is an opposition. Delegate Friesen, last word.
It's, it's all about the safety of our kids. This is a good public-private partnership. And I think there will be, if this saves some lives, especially of our children, and makes people realize what the law is and what they have to do around school buses, then this is well worth it. So I hope you guys will consider passing this.
Committee operates by motion.
Move to report?
Second.
Moved to report, properly seconded.
With the substitute?
Line
With
amendments.
line amendments?
That, ask for vote